Come on, Harbor. Where you at? Make a little noise. Good grief. Woo. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow that. Man, a lot of appreciation for moms this weekend. Happy Mother's Day. Let's give it up for all the moms in the room. Thank you, moms. Man, I've been looking forward to this weekend. I knew there was going to be a skit. I did not know what it was going to be. Interesting. Man, mad props to you guys. And I loved Hannah trying to give those announcements. When you're out of breath and trying to talk, you're like, I just got to catch my breath. Like when I run up here when I'm late getting to the stage, I'm like, I can't preach for a few seconds. I'm just going to have to stand there. It was fun watching it. So I'm glad that you're here. If this is your first time, welcome. We're stoked that you're with us. If you're watching online right now, thanks for joining us that way. Or maybe you're listening to this on the podcast. Either way, my name is Josh. I'm the lead pastor here, and we've been in a series that we're calling Fight Club. And last week, big shout out, I was preaching out in Idaho, and Pastor Ron and Marilyn came and brought last week's lesson in Fight Club. And man, I appreciate what they did. They killed that and did such a great job. And man, we're finishing out this series, and I thought to finish it out, we're going to have to come back and visit again because I've been getting like so many questions, emails. So we'll revisit this again in the future and try to answer some of those. But for the topic that we're going to talk about this weekend on Mother's Day, I thought we would kind of celebrate moms because my mom had a saying that kind of led up to this. So I found some mom sayings. I asked around on social media and said, hey, give me your favorite momism, like things that your mom said. So play along. Those of you that are watching online, you can just type in your answers if you have a favorite one. Those of you that are in the room with me, I want you to raise your hand if your mom ever used this saying and or something close to it, okay? So here are some of the favorites. Go to your room and think about what you did. Anybody you get sent to your room? I knew some of you did. How about this one? Don't go outside with wet hair. You're going to catch a cold. Any of your mom's like, don't do that. Don't do that. All right. I love this one. 2 choices for dinner. Take it or leave it. Yeah. Anybody have some take it or leave it moms? How about I'll give you something to cry about? Wow. Oh, wow. I love New England for this. Okay. Cool. All right. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. Man, some of us had some very loving parents. This is just a popular one. Money doesn't grow on trees. Anybody get that one a lot? Or do you think I'm made out of money? Something like that. If all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? If you're too sick for school, then you're too sick to go play outside. And you get those kind, okay? If you're too full to finish your dinner, then you're too full for dessert. All right. This one, my mom used to say, does anybody have one that said, like, I can't have anything nice? Did your mom ever say those kind of things? I'm the middle of 5 kids, so anything my mom tried to collect that was, like, not supposed to be a toy, we turned into a toy and inevitably broke it. And her saying was, I can't have anything nice. And we would finish the sentence for her. We would break something, she would come in, and we would all look at each other and be like, because we were jerks. But the one that my mom would say a lot, and out of 5 kids, 4 of us were boys, so she had her hands full, and we were always wrestling, always fighting, always picking at each other. And so one that she would say a lot was, can't you guys just get along? Can't you guys just would you leave your brother alone? Leave your sister alone? The constant conflict and battles going on. And man, I don't know where your mom, what kind of mom she was, if you had a good mom or you didn't have a good mom, but whoever it was that raised you, whoever was responsible for you, usually a healthy environment included an adult trying to make peace. It usually included somebody trying to be the level-headed one there. Now, some of us come from families, and maybe your family was just known to fight because you're from New England and, you're Irish or Italian or blame it on whatever your roots are. And if there is that lack of a peacemaker, man, there's a real struggle. And so we've been doing this series on Fight Club and talking about like all of these conflicts we get in, and we've talked about different things you might have to deal with. But one of the most reoccurring questions is, well, how do we make peace? How do we resolve this conflict? So those of you, there were a couple weeks ago, I didn't give any notes. And some of you loved it because you're like, yeah, I just like to focus. And some of you that are like hardcore note takers were like, man, that was hard for me. This weekend's going to be different. This weekend is for the note takers. I'm going to give you so many. We are going to fly and you are going to get writer's cramp, okay? Because what we're going to talk about is I'm going to try to give you, and if you don't take notes, I want you to listen. If you do take notes, I want you to listen too. I'm going to give you some stuff from the Bible that will help you navigate conflict. And we're going to have to go through it pretty fast because there's a lot of content here, but here's what I want to talk about. I want you to ask 4 questions when you're in conflict. And this is the end of the Fight Club series for now, and this is our conflict resolution. What do you do to get out of this conflict, to bring peace, to just get along as your mom would have wanted? So 4 questions I want you to ask. We're going to start simply. The first question that you need to ask when you're trying to get through conflict is simply this. Is there a problem here? Is there a problem here? These are not super fancy questions. I made these as practical and as easy to remember as possible. Now, I want you to remember what the Bible tells you, and we already talked about this. In Romans chapter 12, verse 18, the Bible commands us, do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. Your responsibility is to live in peace. So you have to ask that question, is there a lack of peace here? Do I have a problem? Is this message applicable? Now, maybe it's not for this exact moment in your life. Maybe things with your spouse are peaceful. Things with your kids are peaceful. With your parents, with your boss, with your teacher, with your best friends. Maybe you're at peace with everybody in your world. And so the message this weekend is simply to prepare you for times when you're not at peace. But statistically speaking, most everybody in this room has a lack of peace, has a conflict with somebody in your immediate circumstances, in your immediate surroundings. It might be a family member, it might be a neighbor, it might be a schoolmate or a coworker, something like that. So, is there a problem here? And in this first one, I want you to kind of identify that. Biblically, how do I know if there's a problem? Well, here's how you will know how to know if there's a problem. Here's your next list. And this goes underneath that first question. Do I have a problem here? Is there a problem here? How would I know that? Well, one, you have to ask this question. Has either of us sinned against each other? Is this a conflict? Is this a lack of peace? Is this really a problem? Is this something that God wants me to deal with? Well, question one is, have you sinned against each other? Have either of you done something that was not God's best? And have you done that to them, or have they done that to you? Matthew chapter 5, verse 23. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar and you're in the temple and suddenly you remember that someone has something against you, they have an issue with you, that pops into your mind, oh, he doesn't like me very much. Oh, she's still mad at me. If that pops in your mind, this is what it says. This is what Jesus says. He goes, leave your sacrifice there at the altar and you go and you be reconciled, get reconciliation before you continue sacrificing. Then you come back and you sacrifice to God. What is he saying? Before you move on with your spiritual life, you need to make sure that there isn't something that somebody has against you, and make sure there isn't something you have against somebody. So if you're sitting here right now in this moment, or you're listening to me online, you're under the sound of my voice, and you have a problem with somebody, or somebody has a problem with you, then God says that's something that needs to be taken care of. That is a conflict that needs to be resolved. How about maybe it's not that, maybe it's a different question you ask. Has somebody broken your trust? Has somebody broken your trust? Are you at a place where you cannot trust this person anymore? And it might be for a myriad of different reasons. My wife cannot trust me with her bowl of popcorn while we're watching a movie if she gets up to go to the bathroom. I'm pretty sure in our marriage vows we said what is mine is yours, what is yours is mine. That popcorn is fair game. I don't know. Tough. I'm not sorry. I'm not. And she can't trust me to leave it sitting there uneaten. That's just something we know about each other. But on a deeper level, is there somebody that you're like, man, that person in this area has broken my trust? Then that is a problem that you need to be dealing with. If you cannot trust that person, then yes, that is a problem. How about this one? This one, you're going to hate this one. Have I talked or spoken negatively about somebody? Ooh. Now, you don't understand, Pastor Josh. They kind of deserved it. Let me tell you about what they did. No. You answer the question. I'm trying to figure out, how do I know if I have a problem? How do I know, is there a problem here? Have you talked badly about them? Then there's a problem. I don't like this one, but this is what the Bible teaches us. See, in Titus chapter 3, In verse 2, it says this very specifically. It says, believers. So that's anybody who calls themselves a follower of Christ. Believers must not slander anyone. That's gossip. That's talking down about them. That's sharing their business with other people. You must avoid quarreling, and instead you should be gentle and show true humility to everyone. If you're talking about them, then biblically you have a problem that needs to be reconciled. You could be like, well, I don't like them. I'm just telling other people I don't like them. I love this one. Well, I'm just praying for them. No, you're not. Nobody believes that. Well, I'm just letting other people know to watch out. No, you're gossiping. See, what you're doing, whether you want to admit it or not, you want people to join your side and validate your feelings. And by the way, this still counts as slander if it's you talking to your family about your spouse. Well, we're all family. It's still gossip. If you go to your kids to make sure they understand the problem you have with this other person, that's still it's still unhealthy, it's still bad, it's still sin, and you still have a problem. How about this one? If that one didn't hurt, this question, do I have a problem here? Well, are you imagining payback, revenge, or justice? Oh, please. Come on now. I heard it said if you have two imaginary conversations with that person, then you need to have a real one. I can't tell you how many times on the ride home I'm like, I'm going to tell them this, I'm going to tell them, I'm starting to fantasize about their demise, about them being embarrassed or them getting theirs. Oh man, justice. Oh, wouldn't it be sweet if they got what they did to me? You start imagining that, and that's where your mind goes. You have a problem with them. Oh no, I'm just thinking. Yeah, no, you're meditating on it. It's become something that's unhealthy for you. Let me remind you, first and foremost, Ecclesiastes tells us God is going to judge us for every single thing we do, including the secret things. It's just my thoughts. I'm not actually saying it out loud to anybody. You're thinking it. Yeah, some of you are like, well, I wasn't really on the gossip one, but boy, oh boy, if we're talking about thoughts, I've had some thoughts. You aren't shaking your heads yes, and it's real, man, come on now. I know that, like, I have thoughts about literally everybody all the time. Like, okay, I'm trying to let it go. Like, every driver I think is an idiot, you know? Let alone when it's people I spend a lot of time with. You start talking about coworkers and family members and close friends. Whoo, like your thoughts. This is what Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 says. My dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts. Make sure you're intentional about what you're thinking about. Fix your thoughts on what's true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, admirable. Listen, thinking about Janet getting run over by a tank, thinking about Greg choking on that smelly food that he brought into lunch and stunk up in the microwave, those are not wholesome, healthy, that whole list. It's not right and honorable and pure and lovely. It says think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. The stuff you're thinking about is not it. And when you start having those thoughts repeatedly about somebody, you have a problem. You need to deal with it. How about this? How about this one? Last on this list of how do I know if I have a problem? Are you trying to avoid someone? Are you hoping that you don't run into them? Are you going out of your way because you know which door they like to go in and out? So you're going to, are you actively avoiding somebody? You got a problem. You got a problem. It says this in Ephesians chapter 4:26. Don't sin by letting anger control you, and don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. Why? Because your anger is going to give a foothold to the devil. He's going to get into your life. He's going to hold on. So if you have somebody in your family, husbands and wives, he loves to do this. If you have somebody in your family that you have anger against, now you're like, the cold shoulder is another way of avoiding it. So when I say, are you actively avoiding somebody? You are not, I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to let them feel it for a while. I'm going to let them think about what they've done. Nah, still got a problem. Now, some of you are sitting here and you're justifying in your mind why this doesn't apply to you. You're like, no, I'm avoiding it because it's just not a big deal. I'm just not a big deal. I'm fine. Honestly, you're saying these things and it's fine. They hurt my feelings, but I'm over it. I don't care. I literally had this conversation with somebody just a couple days ago. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to make it right. I don't need to deal with it. I'm fine. I'm over it. It's no big deal. I'm like, bro, you keep rehashing it in your mind. You're allowing it to affect your heart. You're avoiding having conversations with you. You really aren't fine. You keep saying you are, but you really aren't. But the answer was, no, I'm just trying to be a peacemaker. Now, the Bible does command us to be peacemakers. But when you have something, when there is conflict between you and somebody else, unless you are actively working to fix the conflict, you're not a peacemaker, you're a peace faker. And here's what you need to understand. And when there is conflict, there's only three options. You can either be a peacemaker, a peace breaker, or a peace faker. That is your option when there is conflict. You saying, I'm avoiding it, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm going to think about something else, that is not healthy, and that is not what God has called you to. Now, if we're at the point, and this is where I have to be careful how I preach, because there's people here that you heard that and you're like, yeah, my message. I'm ready to let some people know about some conflict we got. I ain't shy, Pastor Josh. I got a list. I'm going to use this message and I'm going to go in guns a-blazing. You and you and you and you and you and you don't know, Pastor Josh said we got to fix some things. I got some things with everybody at work. We all going to be having talks. And some of you have misunderstood what I'm saying. Because first off, is there a problem is question one. If we're trying to get to the four questions we need to ask when we're in conflict is, number one, is there a problem? But number two question that we need to ask is, can I let this go? You need to ask that question because it's something that God's told you to do. Is there a problem? Let's figure that out. Now, when it comes to that problem, is this something that I can get over? Is this something, like Queen Elsa tells me to do, just let it go, let it go? Can I do that? Or can I not do that? Why would I want to do that? Well, Proverbs 19:11 says it's a person's wisdom that yields patience, and it's to one's glory to overlook an offense. It is a glory to say, I'm going to let that go. Some of you haven't done that in a long time. Sure, there's people who avoid conflict, but there are some of you that you just thrive on it. You're like, we're going to talk about it. You're going to be offended 100 times a day, and you're like, why let 10 of them go? You got 90 problems every day. This is what Ephesians tells us. This is Paul writing to the church at Ephesus. Paul, imagine he wrote this letter to the church on Cape Cod. Dear Harbor.Church, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, me, Paul, I'm in jail because I love God. I'm the one that's begging you guys. I'm begging you, Harbor.Church, to lead a life worthy of your calling. You've been called by God. So always be humble and be gentle and be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Satan hates what's happening here. We are one of the fastest growing churches in all of the northeast of the United States of America. I love that. God is clearly doing something here on Cape Cod, in Massachusetts, and through our church. I love that. Satan hates that. So what he will do is he will creep in here in any way he can to undermine any bit of unity that we have. He loves to work in churches and pull people apart. Some of you have been a part of churches where all they do is just have bitterness and gossip and resentment towards each other. That's not from God. All that does is ruin their reputation and their testimony with other people. Here, let me just solve this for you real quick. I will tick you off. I will disappoint you, I will anger you, and so will the other people in this room. But you need to understand this, so will you. And God has called us to live in unity with each other. So when two believers who claim that Jesus Christ is the most important thing, If we can't find a way to get past an impasse, to get past a conflict, to get past an issue, if I can't figure out how to make it work with you, and we're two people that have surrendered to not be in and of ourselves, but to be followers of Christ, and we both have the Holy Spirit in us, if I can't do that with you, ain't no way I'm doing that with Bill at work. Or Jill next door. There ain't no way I'm going to get along with people who don't know Jesus. If the people who claim to know and follow him won't surrender themselves enough and humble themselves enough to work together in a united spirit of peace, then let's not kid ourselves. We ain't going to bring anything to the world outside of it. In here, it's supposed to be helped on both sides. Out there, it's going to be one-sided. And if you're not ready for here, then you're definitely not ready for there. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? Because somebody probably took your parking spot tonight. Somebody's probably sitting in your favorite seat, cut in front of you in line at the coffee. Just love them. Love them anyways. Be the bigger person. Forgive. Make an allowance for it. Colossians, he writes it to another church, the church at Colossae. He says, hey, since God chose you to be a holy people he loves, you must clothe yourself with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. That's what you should be clothed with. That's what you should look like. Why? Because that allows you, the next verse, to make allowance for each other's faults, forgiving anyone who has offended you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. See, I can't remember what God did for me when all I'm focused on is all my pain and all my hurt and how much you've annoyed me. Now, by the way, if I can't get there with you, how am I going to do it tomorrow at work with somebody who doesn't know Jesus? How am I going to do it with Uncle Ted when he comes over for dinner and, man, he just starts running his mouth and ticking me off? How am I ever going to be there? I haven't practiced it here. You know why you haven't practiced it here? Because you come in late and you leave early. As soon as we get done, you run to your car. You don't make any friends. You don't go to Connect Group. You don't serve in a ministry. You're not being a part of the body of Christ, so you're not being grown to be a deeper Christian. And then you're coming to church and you're not getting the value of church, and so you're not living a life out there in the world anything better than what you're living normally. God has designed the church to push you to be more of the person he's called you to be, and it will be growing pains because he'll make you get along with people that are hard to get along with, and they're thinking that about you right now. And if you don't do it because you won't get plugged in, don't be surprised that you haven't grown. Well, how do I know when I shouldn't let it go? Good question. How do I know when I can't just let it go? Well, here's the question. Is it dishonoring to God? Is the offense something that dishonored God? Romans 2:23-24 says, you're so proud of knowing the law, but you dishonor God by breaking God's laws. When you sin, you dishonor God. And he says, no wonder the scriptures say that Gentiles blaspheme the name of God because of you. Pagans, people who do not know and follow God, people who actively reject God, is what he's talking about here, do so because you are the lawbreaker that doesn't do anything to honor God. You are dishonoring God, so why should they ever honor God? He's saying if you have committed a sin, it's a dishonor to God. So should I let it go? Well, is it just an issue with your preference, or is this actually a sin against God? Don't let it go if it's a sin against God. How about this one? Is this something that's damaging the relationship? By the way, listen. They ate your last French fry is not damaging the relationship. You just need to get over it a little bit, okay? Know the difference between damaging the relationship and you just don't get your way. I didn't see anybody write that down. Know the difference between something that's damaging the relationship versus you just not getting your way, okay? If it's damaging the relationship, then don't let it go. Deal with it. Proverbs 18:19. An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. And arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. Do not let something come between you and a friendship, whether that's your own child or your brother or sister or your best friend or your classmate or the guy who shares a cubicle with you. Do not let something drive you apart, because once that rift has been pushed, it's much harder to come back. If you cut it off early, deal with it quick, you can be there. Some of you aren't talking to somebody, you can't remember the original offense, you just know you don't like them. Why? Because so much time has happened that this gap has widened. I don't like them. And it probably went back to something super stupid. But you can't even remember the small thing because that's what it does over time. Last one on whether or not I should let it go. Is it hurting someone? Let me pause real quick before we move on. Do not let it go if somebody's actions are causing damage to somebody else. Don't look the other way. You might, well, that's this, or that's them and them. No. Is that person hurting that person? Don't let that go. It also works this way, because some of you have this with family members. If somebody I love is doing something that hurts them, I care. I am not going to let it go. You are hurting yourself. And she'd be like, well, that's up to them. No. If I love them, and God told me to love them the way I love myself, then I don't want that happening to them. So I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to look the other way. You have something, listen to me, you have something toxic in your life, and if I truly love you, then I care enough to help you get past this. Do not shy away from those kind of conversations just because you're like, I don't know if they'll appreciate it. Resolving conflict isn't about getting them to appreciate you necessarily. So we ask, when we're trying to figure out when we're in conflict, we ask, is there a problem here? We ask, can I let this go? And if I can't let this go, then the next question I have to ask is this one, and you won't like it. What's my part to own? See, some of you have got, in your mind, you're like, yeah, this could work for my neighbor or my ex or whoever, but because they did, and I got issues with them because they hurt me and they did this to me and they did this, and all you've got is your side of all of their issues. Here's what I'm telling you, rarely is there a conflict where it's 100% somebody else's fault. Very rarely. And especially inside of a marriage or a family. Now, I'm not saying they aren't the majority to blame, but I'm saying you've got a role to play. Let me remind you what it says in Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, verse 3. Why worry about a speck in somebody else's eye when you have a log in your eye? The Bible paints really great pictures. Imagine somebody who got a telephone pole stuck on their face. And then imagine them trying to navigate the telephone pole and get sawdust out of somebody else's eye. You'd be like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. That is you trying to deal with somebody else's problems before you've dealt with your own. That's why we don't have much success in conflict resolution. The Bible says, start with yourself. How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite. First, get rid of the log in your own eye, then you can see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. See, I am supposed to deal with the speck in my friend's eye, but I need to be able to see clearly to do that. Have a surgeon come in, he's like, I'm going to operate in some very, very small areas on your body. We're going to do some microscopic stuff, and dude's got a big stick in his face. I'm like, no, you're not. You don't see clearly enough to be worrying about me. You go deal with you, bro. That's how people feel when you come up and you're like, let's talk about your anger problem. They're like, talk about my anger problem? Let's talk about your lying problem. Ooh. They know, and if you don't own yours, they don't want to hear from you. I'm trying to help you out here. So, what's my part to own? How do I own up to my part? Two things really quick. You acknowledge that your actions, big or small, have contributed to the conflict. You have to acknowledge, even if your actions were small, that you played a role in this. You're not going to get them to open up if you're like, this is all you. It's all on you. We're going to fix you today. Come to it humbly saying, hey, I know I'm not perfect either. It's one of the best ways to help somebody lower their defense is when you admit that you got things to work on too. And then secondly, sincerely apologize. Make a sincere apology. Pastor, I don't know how to make a sincere apology. Don't worry. That's how I'm going to close this message. So, how do I own my own part? I got to know that I've got to do it. What's that leave me with? If I know we're in conflict, I know we got a problem, I know I can't let it go, and I know what my part is, then the last question you have to ask is, hey, can we talk? Can we talk? Some of you need to get better at this phrase because you're so conflict avoidant. You haven't used this phrase in your family with that person in a long time because you've already answered for them and you've already defended and you already see how it goes. So you just avoid the whole thing. And God's telling you, no, that's not how we solve things. You need to get good at this phrase. Hey, can we talk? Can we talk? Parents, one of the most powerful things that you can do in your child's life is say, hey, can we talk? We need to talk. Let's sit down. Can we grab a coffee? I mean, that not with your kids if they're small, don't do that. But like, can we hang out? There's somebody in your life you need to go say, hey, can we talk? You need to get comfortable with this. This is one of the best phrases to save a relationship. Can we talk? Galatians chapter 6, verse number 1. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path, and be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way you will obey the law of Christ. I need to pursue you gently, humbly, and bear with you whatever burden it is that we're going through. You're like, well, that's only for husbands and wives. No. God's called us to love everybody this way. You're just not practiced enough to do it with your enemies yet. Some of you aren't practiced enough to do it with your closest friends. You just have never done it. You got to start somewhere. How can I pursue reconciliation? How do I pursue this idea of reconciliation? Well, I'm going to give them to you. Here's the clutch piece of this. We're going to find it starting in Matthew chapter 18. If another believer, if another person sins against you, go privately, point out the offense privately. If the other person listens and confesses, then you've won that person back. You've won that friendship back. But if you're unsuccessful, take one or two others with you, and you go back again, so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then, if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. What is that saying? What are the steps to reconciliation that this verse is telling us? Well, first it's saying this: if you want reconciliation, how do I pursue reconciliation? Well, first and foremost, talk in private. Go talk in private. Hey, can we talk? Let's just start me and you. I'm not bringing people to it. It's just me and you. Let's talk. Let's talk about what's going on. If that doesn't work, then you bring a neutral party. Bring somebody else. Don't bring your best friend so she can sit there and be like, yeah, I agree with her. You're the worst. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't get your buddy from work to go tell this person, yeah, we both think you suck. No, that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about you weren't able one-on-one to get past this, so you need a mediator. And a mediator isn't somebody who's already made up their mind on which side they're on. Some of you aren't hearing me. You went and you whined to your mom for 5 hours, and then you called her to come in and mediate between you. No, that's not going to work. She's got a whole earful of your side of it. Get somebody who you can trust that loves you both and is a neutral party. And let that happen. Let that bring in. That's, by the way, why you're involved in a church and you go to connect groups and you join ministry teams, so you can find godly people who would fill this role for you. I don't have anybody in my life. That's up on you. We got tons and tons and tons of ways for you to find other people to do life with, so you can have some of these resources. If you don't have them, that's not because they're not available. It's because you're not available to them. If that doesn't work, then try again with spiritual leaders from the church. So you went, they said no. You went with a mediator, and that person didn't work. So now you got to go to your leaders. Go to people whose spiritual maturity you trust. Now, by the way, this is designed for how two believers come back together. The same thing works on a lesser level between you and somebody who isn't a believer. So maybe this third party, I've been brought in on a lot of family issues and personal issues, and brought in less as their pastor and more as a counselor. And you need to get somebody who can speak with some authority, but that also depends on who that person has as authority in their life. It'll be really hard for me to speak with any kind of authority into somebody in your life who doesn't ever come to church, doesn't believe in God. They're not going to see a whole lot of value in that. And that's why we work so hard to maintain healthy relationships inside the church. If they still won't listen and repent, now, if there is somebody who you have now made 3 attempts to reconcile to them and they still won't listen, then what you need to do, if this person is truly creating a problem and they will not get past it, and you have done all of the steps humbly like you're supposed to, that is when you create distance. And we talked about this when King Saul was coming after David. You create distance. What you do is you establish boundaries, and then you remove their access to you. This is going to be difficult, but this is what you're going to have to do in these situations. You're going to have to establish some distance or create some distance, establish some boundaries, and you're going to have to remove their access to you. You cannot continue to be in toxic relationships over and over and over again. Well, what if I work with them? Okay, well, then you're going to have to limit your actual interaction with them. And if you're the kind of worker you're supposed to be before God, you are a hard worker who is honest and faithful, and you have an admirable, honorable reputation, your boss will want to protect you from the more toxic person in the work environment. You know what it won't work is if you're just as toxic as they are and I'm your boss, I'm like, figure it out between the two of you. I don't like either of you. I have no value in protecting you because you're not somebody worth protecting. Don't act like them, and you'll be set up for a place where you're like, hey, I need to stay in a healthy environment. And a good boss will be like, yeah, I got to keep these people away because this one's toxic, but this one's worth keeping around. Now, maybe that's not your work environment. What if it's my family member? Okay, listen, there are family members that you can love them and still limit their access. I understand that everybody in here is thinking of a but situation, and I know there's a million individual things that we have to walk through. I'm just telling you the principle and how it breaks down, how it is applied. That's a little bit different. But let me also remind you of this in the middle of all of this. Regardless of their response, you have to forgive. It doesn't matter if they accept it or not, or admit guilt or not, or ask for your forgiveness. Your responsibility is to forgive. Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 says this: since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourself with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. I read this to you. Did you see me read a part where it says, after they make their apologies? Do you see a parenthesis there that says, when they acknowledge how jacked up they are? When they pay for their sins and you've got your pound of flesh, forgive them. Does anybody see any of that in that verse? Your command is to forgive them. You must forgive because God forgave you. You know what you did to earn that forgiveness? Jack squat. And God gave it to you. And your unwillingness to forgive other people speaks to the fact that you don't really understand what it is that God's done for you. Do not pat yourself on the back for being some kind of deep Christian when you won't forgive other people. You are not that deep because you haven't understood the basic principle of how God loved you so much that he forgave you even though you didn't deserve it. So you have to walk through. I'm not saying what they did didn't hurt. I'm not saying they're not jerks. I'm just saying you have to forgive. Here's a list for you because some of you are hurting right now and I want you to understand this. What forgiveness is not. When I talk about forgiveness, I'm not talking about these things. When I talk about you forgiving, I'm not talking about this. What forgiveness is not, it's not excusing. I'm not asking you to make an excuse for the sin. I forgive them because they didn't know what they were doing. No, you're making an excuse for sin. That's not forgiveness. Excuses is not forgiveness. God says that all sin has to be paid for. He didn't make an excuse for sin. You can't make an excuse for sin. That is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not denial. Some of you are like, I forgive him, and you're pretending like it never happened. No, you're living in denial. That's not forgiveness. Denial, don't pretend. By the way, don't pretend you're not hurt. I forgive him because it doesn't really matter. I'm not really hurt. I'm fine. It's fine. I'm fine. You're not fine. And that's not forgiveness. Covering up your wounds by saying you're not hurt doesn't make it forgiveness. It just makes you wounded. And now you're bleeding out, and there's never going to be any fixing of the problem. There's never going to be any management to those wounds because you've covered them up saying you're not wounded. You're in denial, not in forgiveness. By the way, here's another one. This one's a little bit on the other side. Forgiveness is not a feeling. It's not about, do I feel like forgiving? Understand me. Forgiveness is a decision you make regardless of how you feel about them. I really don't like my ex. That's a feeling. You can still forgive them. I really don't like this teacher, this boss, this neighbor. That's a feeling. You can still forgive in spite of your feelings. By the way, forgetting is not forgiveness either. I'm just going to put it out of my mind. It's similar to denial. If I just get enough time where it's just never happened, no, forgetting about it, in order to really forgive, hear me on this one. In order to truly forgive, you have to actually remember the offense. I'm not forgiving you if I don't actually take the offense, take it to a real God who died on a cross to pay for that offense. If I'm not willing to remember it, it's not really forgiveness. Forgiveness, by the way, and I want to help some people because I don't know that you caught this on the last time I preached. Forgiveness is not trust. Somebody did something to you, you can forgive them. That does not mean you have to trust them. Some of you were hurt by some very evil, bad people. I am not saying you have to invite them back in with trust. I am saying you can forgive them without allowing them any more access to hurt you again. Forgiveness, that's a gift. Trust is something that's earned. Also, forgiveness is not optional. Forgiveness is not optional. God commands us to forgive. So your refusal to forgive is your rebellion against God. Write that down. Your refusal to forgive that person is your open rebellion against God. He has commanded you to forgive. You're making it optional dependent on whether you want to or not, and it's not up to you on that. You're called to do it. And your refusal to do it speaks to your rebellion and your immaturity in your walk with God. Pastor Josh, I don't like this message. I don't like preaching it. But we both need it. Last but not least, forgiveness is not reconciliation. Well, I thought this whole message was on reconciliation. Well, it's the goal. I hope we get reconciled. But see, here's what you need to understand. Reconciliation is two people. Reconciliation is two people responding. Forgiveness is me to God. If you and I can't get along, we need to reconcile. But I can forgive you and you never do anything to earn it or to respond to it, because my forgiveness for the thing that's against you and me, my forgiveness for that is between me and God. Reconciliation is between us, and I should want reconciliation, but forgiveness, like, you can't put that caveat. And some of you, this is what you're doing. I will forgive when we're reconciled. No. You forgive whether or not you're reconciled. And it's your heart that's willing to do that makes it possible for true reconciliation. I love you and forgive you even if we never reconcile. But my hope is that we will. Now, I told you that I would end by helping you go back to that last part that says, how do I truly ask for forgiveness? Part of you owning it is acknowledging, hey, I have a part to play. And the second part of that was that you were going to say, I'm sorry. Some of you have never learned what a real apology looks like. How to truly seek forgiveness. So let me close with this, because this is healthy for every relationship you have, including the relationship you have with God. But you're at an impasse with somebody, I want you to remember these 4 A's, right? If you get nothing else out of this message, remember these. First, the first step to reconciliation, to really seeking forgiveness, is you have to admit what you did was wrong. Admit what you did wrong. Do not start an apology by, you did this and you did this and you did this. Start the apology by saying, here's what I did. Here's where I'm wrong. Once again, you could be 5% wrong and they are 95% wrong. Your apology, you seeking forgiveness, is not about you pointing out their faults. You owning what you did starts with you saying, here's where I messed up. And sometimes, here's why I'm trying to help you, because some of you are like, I said I'm sorry, Pastor Josh. I told her I'm sorry and she won't forgive me. She doesn't believe you. Because I'm sorry. That gets old. Why don't you start with, hey, I realize I lost my temper. I realize I said hateful things. I realize I betrayed your trust. I realize I acted out of anger. I realize that I said things that I can't take back that I know hurt you. And I literally picked on things that I know you're insecure about because I wanted you to feel bad like I felt bad. And I know that that's just wrong. See, that's much more than, I'm sorry. Own it. Here's what I did wrong. After you admit what you did wrong, then you apologize. And you don't just say, I'm sorry. You say, sorry for this specific thing. I realize what I did. I acted out of insecurity. I made a joke at your expense because I'm insecure and I was trying to get a laugh from the room. So I picked on something that was low-hanging fruit and I embarrassed you. I'm sorry for hurting you, for embarrassing you, for putting you on that spot in front of other people. I'm sorry. See, I admit it, then I apologize. And thirdly, I ask for forgiveness. Will you forgive me? See, there's a lot more to a true apology than just, I'm sorry. Sorry. No. Here's what I did wrong. Here's why I'm sorry for what it did to you. And I'm asking, will you forgive me? And you would hope it ends there, but here's how you know when it's real or not, is the last one. You accept the consequences. Because see, here's the thing. If I am truly sorry, my actions will change. And if my actions never change, then I'm not really sorry. I'm not really apologizing. I just want you to stop being mad at me. So if I'm going to accept the consequences, then I have to make it right by altering my behavior. Some of you in your apologies, you need to offer corrections. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm sorry that I've continued to look at pornography. I'm sorry for what that did in our relationship. I'm sorry for how that makes you feel. I'm sorry for how that's torn us apart. Will you forgive me? I will not only get rid of my laptop, I'm going to give you all of my passcodes to my phone so you can see it. I'll put some filters on. I will get some software that keeps track of everything I look at. I will accept the consequences that my actions have had between us. You fill in the blank, whatever your offense is. I did this thing to you, so I'm going to alter the way I talk to you. I will no longer call you in anger and just run my mouth at you. What I will do from here on, because I know I've hurt the trust, I will write down the things that I'm frustrated about, and I will speak to you calmly. And if I can't speak to you calmly, I will wait until I can. I'm just making up things right now, but you guys have to understand, real apologies mean I will alter my behavior. If I'm truly sorry, I will not continue to act this way. A willingness to change demonstrates true sorrow. Now, why do I say all this? Because at the end of this message, if every relationship you have is perfect and you don't need anything I just preached on, that 4 steps, those 4 A's, are how you should be going to God. So even if everything's perfect between you and everybody else, how about in the next conversation you have with God, you go to God and you, instead of saying, God, forgive me, you owe me, you got to forgive me, you're God, forgive me, and move on. How about you go to God and you admit, God, I've been filled with anger and pride. I've belittled you and I've ignored the Bible. I've focused only on what I want. You start admitting real sins. Like, say them out loud. I've been filled with lust. I've been filled with greed. I'm acting in an ego. You can be totally blunt and honest with God because you're not surprising him with anything. And you will find, this is what some of you have not felt in a long time. When you start verbalizing and owning your mess, how it starts to lift off of you. You haven't told anybody that you're egotistical. God already knows. You're just admitting to something that you won't admit out loud. God, I got a pride issue. God, I have an insecurity issue. God, my anger gets the betterment of me and I don't even know why. I'm so ashamed and I feel so guilty for the way I treated my kids. God, I know that I cheated on that thing, and now I feel like I've fallen so far away from being who you've called me to be. You start admitting and naming it, man, it starts to become real. And then you apologize. You say, God, will you forgive me? And you could know fully well that he will because he promises he will, but you still need to go and ask because it's not about God going like, oh, I didn't know that. I guess I'll forgive you. It's about you humbling yourself and teaching your flesh that it's not in control. So you get down on your knees and you say, God, forgive me, please. And then in that apology, and in that apology and in that asking for forgiveness, you need to be receptive to the things that God wants to change. Because even right now, some of you are thinking about the things that you need to go to God about. You can feel him saying, I need your actions to change. So I need you to accept the consequences, because you are not somebody who's doing a good job in this area. And the consequences are, I need to change some things in your life, and we got to change some habits. We got to deal with some issues. We're talking about Mother's Day this weekend. Can you imagine if your mom could see you with a truly repentant spirit? Somebody who's not just, yeah, I make mistakes, but somebody who truly owns their crap and is moving past it, accepting consequences and changing their behavior. Talk about a gift. You'd be a gift to everybody who knows you if you're willing to have that kind of spirit, that kind of heart, go through that kind of change. And even if you don't have a mom, or you don't know your mom, or she's already gone, this is the relationship you can have between you and God, and he will use it to impact every other relationship that you have. If you can get good at the 4 A's between you and God, then you can start to get good at them with other people, and your relationships will start to flourish and prosper because you've learned that humility and you've gotten better at kind of owning what you got to own. And people will start to see you as an honest person who's willing to change versus somebody who just throws up shallow I'm sorries. The choice is yours. Would you bow your head? Would you close your eyes? Let me pray out loud over you. With your eyes closed and your head bowed, what do you need to admit to God tonight? Not because he doesn't already know, but because you have never admitted it. What is it you need to admit to God right now? God, I'm sorry. God, I've done this. I'm guilty of this. God, this is who I am. What do you need to admit right now in this moment? What is it you need to apologize for? God, I'm sorry that I have done these things. God, I'm sorry that I have hurt you. I'm sorry that I've taken it for granted what you did on the cross. You died to take my sins away, and I'm sorry that I acted as if though that wasn't important. I'm sorry that I went back to continue to sin again and again for the thing that you paid for. God, will you forgive me? In the quiet of this moment, what relationship is it that God's calling you to make amends? Who is it that you need to go have a can we talk kind of conversation with? Hey, can we talk? Where is it in your life that you haven't been owning your responsibilities? In this moment, if you simply say, God, I need to be better. I need more of you and less of me. Lord, show me what relationships I need to put some focus on. Show me where I can mend some bridges, some olive branches I can extend to people. I promise you the Holy Spirit will start to poke you about people you need to reach out to. But before you're ready to do that with other people, you need to have a serious conversation between you and God, where you admit, you apologize, where you truly accept the consequences. The thing that God right now is telling you have to change, let's change it. Before you walk out of this room, before you leave this message, why don't you pray? As I pray out loud, why don't you pray quietly? Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, we come before you. And Lord, we recognize that we need you more than we need ourselves. We need you more than we need anything else. God, would you work in our hearts here and now before we dismiss, before we sing our last song, before we pack up and go about our week? God, would you right here, right now, meet us in this moment and help us find a step to take to look more like Jesus and less like ourselves. God, there's so many of us in this room or under the sound of my voice, we live in denial. We want to make all of our problems somebody else's fault. God, so many of us have been hurt or broken. And God, what you want more than anything is you want us to have a heart of peace. You want us to have an attitude where we can be filled with joy for all the people around us. So God, would you help us forgive? Would you help us truly let go of things that just need to be let go? God, would you give us the strength and the courage to have conversations with people that we've been afraid to talk to? God, would you help us extend out an olive branch? Would you give us the courage and the strength to say, hey, we need to talk? Can we talk? Can we get past this? God, help your people look more like you. Help us infuse in our workplaces, in our homes, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, the love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ. And God, would you help each and every one of us just be a little bit more honest with you? God, I believe there's somebody here right now that needs to just honestly accept that they are not close to you. They don't have a relationship with you. They've never found your forgiveness. Lord, you said that if we confess our sins, you will faithfully forgive us of all of our unrighteousness, of all of our wickedness, if we would just come to you with a real, sincere apology. So God, tonight, would you help somebody right now have an apology for salvation, have a true conversation where they find your forgiveness and accept your forgiveness and start a relationship with you. God, there's somebody here that just needs you more than anything else. They need your forgiveness and they need a relationship with you. I pray that you would give them the strength to do that. It's in your name that we ask all of this. Amen.